down to the lowest price since August, and soybeans bouncing back. The one who is going to explain why is Jerry Gidel, and he'll also tell you what to do right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So, Jerry, I would like to start from corn, with corn. But corn is tumbling down from with the lowest price since August. So, what do you think is in explaining this market move?
Well, it's definitely a little bit of a head scratcher to say the least here. After we hit $7 last week on the spot December, and that the latest USDA news here midweek, wasn't crazily negative, but it really didn't inspire anybody either. And in general, I think that's what left things on the defensive here after midday or after midweek, and then yesterday both corn and soybeans kind of took a tumble here as our friends, the funds, decided to be a little defensive here when both December corn and January beans both slipped below their 200-day moving average. And that really is a psychological and very important level for their participation in things. And I think some stops got hit. So we bounced back nicely in beans, but still a little sluggish in corn today. From there, the nationwide average on U.S. corn was up 4/10, but wow, that's not a huge advantage here, to say the least.
Yes, and given that situation, what do you think will be the best approach from the point of view of the US farmers in terms of marketing?
Well, we've been looking to try to sell some rallies, and that kind of felt like we had a shot to get above the $7 value, and that uh, on the spot nearby, because the basis levels are very, very strong here, particularly in parts of the Western Corn Belt where the yields have been really hurt this year. And so there's premiums above the futures price in that. And so that tends to say that there's a potential maybe of getting above that $7. But I'd have to say probably at this point, between now and early December, when traditionally the markets kind of peak out on the enthusiasm of large shipments on the Mississippi. And at this point, they've really been hurt this year, as we well know. But there still is looks like there's going to be a little bit of flurry of late activity because the river is trying to see a little bit of a recovery here under some recent rains and that. But I kind of feel like that there is a maybe still a little bit of recovery here, bouncing back up into that 660, 680 values again on things. But we have been on our newsletters and after the USDA report suggesting people take advantage of that to move up around 60, 65%, primarily because of the fact that the world is totally convinced that El Nino is going to disappear here in a few weeks. And all of a sudden, all the problems in Argentina and that's currently there and the U.S. weather problems in the plains are all going to disappear. But I'm not so confident about that. But at this point, until we get a different attitude about the weather in the world, right now there seems to be defensive tone that things are going to be on the improvement. Now, it's 2 years of La Nina, or excuse me, yes, El Nina, and there is a probability that's going to come back to the normal at this point. But until we do, I think you got to keep an eye on that.
And other than the situation in Argentina, what else you are seeing from overseas that is impacting the market?
Oh, definitely. the Argentine weather situation is part of it. Now, the one interesting twist on it here is that there is chances for a maybe inch or inch and a half rains maybe coming across some parts of that country over this next weekend and early next week, and that which would be beneficial, no doubt, but there's not a lot of indications it's going to completely change the weather forecast after that. This, say, the next 4 or 5 days are looking for dryness coming back at. But as you mentioned here, what other things could have an impact on corn and even wheat at this point? They're all tied together here on this negotiations that's going on here between, I guess, this Russia and the UN. I'm not sure that Turkey is really still going to provide their benefits here of marshaling things through the isthmus out of the Black Sea and that. But at the same time, I don't think the Ukrainians are demanding anything differently or anything like that. The one thing is kind of twisting right now. There's been talk that they're going to extend it for a year. I just do not see that at all. There might be another quarter or maybe talking about 3 or 4 months type situations over the winter, but I don't see that there's any type of long-term agreement here because at this point, the Russians got. I'm not sure they definitely reacted to the so-called drone attack, but it didn't damage much, and they decided they needed to be back in the keeping things going. But the biggest question in this thing is that they really think that the West is not doing them any favor here by not supporting their transportation or their insurance on their cargoes or things like that. And I don't know how much more the U.S. can't tell people that they have to do things. And at this point, a lot of this stuff is handled by the Europeans, and that on their, Lloyd's of London and people like that, Marsh, and all that. And I just don't know how much people will give lip service to the fact that no, we're not doing anything. But at this point, I'm not sure there's going to be a tremendous jumping in to say, oh, yes, Russia, we love to support you while you're bashing your neighbor. I don't think there's a lot of enthusiasm for that concept. So I don't know. They might get extended next Saturday, but it might not go very long if the Russians don't get what they think they deserve.
Yes, and looking forward to next week. I think several states will also finish the works in the U.S.
Oh, you mean the harvest in the U.S.? Yeah, it's pretty well running down. We're like 94% of beans and corn. We're moving up. Most likely, we'll be in that low 90s again next week. Traditionally, the Sunday before the updates are pretty well nailed down on U.S. harvest, and that because really the market is starting to really look at the plain states for wheat, things of that nature. The wheat statistics here in the U.S. continue to be extremely tight. They actually tightened above 7 million on feed demand. Food demand on this latest report. And right now, at least, yes, things might stabilize a little bit in Argentina for a bit. But interestingly enough, earlier this week, the Rosario Exchange decided that they thought their number at 11.8 million metric tons, down from 13.3, I think it was. And that's so, wow, if we get a little rain, we might go back up to 12 and a half for 13. Well, that's still 10 million metric tons lower than last year. That's not a huge crop by any means. And it does suggest that our friends in Brazil, who are big time buyers of Argentine wheat, are not going to find enough supply. And there's even talk that the Argentina will maybe not ship some of the previous purchases to Brazil because of this small crop. And so the Brazilians might have to be looking elsewhere. I know that they could buy it from France or they could buy it from Australia, but the wheat that they like and also the transportation still favors the U.S. But that's definitely things that to be determined ahead of us here. And I think one of the bigger factors is going to be how this thing proceeds towards the food corridor agreement extension here at the end of next week.
Yes, and what else would you like to add, Mr. Gidel?
Well, I think we have to touch on the beans a little bit here. The soybeans, we bounced back today on a pretty good feature here from the standpoint that the latest statistics are that we had on Wednesday. We also had a 4/10 of a bushel increase there in that, but are still basically at 50 point 3 bushels an acre. That's still at least potentially near 1.7 to 2 bushels less than trend. There was some kind of impressive kind of performances from Missouri and Kansas, or excuse me, Missouri and Nebraska that had their yields go up, but the soybean yields in the Eastern Corn Belt didn't change a lot. The ones that kind of was surprising in all this numbers was the big change where the Eastern Corn Belt went up in corn and then the Western Corn Belt went down overall. Not totally surprising, but we had a lot of changes. So it does suggest our final numbers in January might not see as big adjustments as we sometimes do. But getting back to the situation on soybeans and that, well, we did get up into the 1450s, 1460s nearby stuff earlier last week and early this week. And so we're up in the 60% area. I definitely encourage people to kind of look at that. From there, 220 million metric tons carryover stock, though, is extremely tough. And if right now, the USDA actually slipped back Argentina's bean production by 1.5 million metric tons versus the changes in corn, which is kind of interesting. But the interesting twist on that is that the corn right now that's not being planted will likely be planted after corn and wheat and all that back in January and after. So the beans that have not been planted now in some core areas is the reason why they made that adjustment downward. Now, that's not changing Brazil's numbers. Brazil at this point, there's lots of people down there. Suppress Marcano even today actually increased their number over 154 million metric tons. That's a couple million higher than the U.S. Uh, the thing about all these things is that everybody thinks that La Nina is dead and the world is going to have great weather and there's no problems in the world and with the food corridor, all those type of things. First, we have to see something about it. We've been talking about all these changes, but we need to see some of them to occur. Otherwise, this market is still could be quite emotional in that because we're dealing with small U.S. and world carryover stocks really across the board: wheat, corn, and beans. And so there's not a lot of excess supply again will be lurking around the corner here to supply things if things don't exactly pan out.
All right, Jerry, thank you very much.
You bet. It's always good to talk, Luis, and we will edge along here towards the end of November.